Okay, so we're talking about elections. I guess the first question I wanted to ask you was about the Democrats. It seems, if we look at the polling, things don't look too bad for them. Certainly, it's all relative in Florida. That voter registration divide, though, remains. Do Democrats seem hopeful, do you think, ahead of this year's midterms? Can they look to other places in the country maybe for some inspiration, do you think?
Yeah, well, and that voter registration advantage isn't just very high. It's at about 1.5 million, but it's still growing. Republicans are really looking to flip certain blue counties even before the election, like Palm Beach County is a big one that's sort of in their sights. Democrats still seem a little bit, doom and gloom, I would say. However, they definitely are looking at certain seats where they think they might have a chance. And they're looking at folks like Alex Vindman, who is running for US Senate, who raked in $1.7 million during his first day of fundraising. Which was a significant amount of money. So even if he doesn't win, they see potentially people like him as being able to help them, bring in more energy, bring in more cash. They're desperately trying to get the national DNC to invest in Florida. And they keep saying that they will, but I have yet to see, those numbers come in. Having said that, we're still far away from the August primary. And so we could even see some others get into the race. There's still no major candidate for agriculture commissioner or chief financial officer. So really, I would say that there are key House races to watch. And on top of that, probably more looking down through the legislature, and maybe the Democrats might be able to no longer be overcome by a Republican supermajority.
Well, talking about interesting races in the legislature, there's a key state house special election set for next week that Democrats are eyeing as a potential flip. Give us the background on that district, if you can, and the feeling among Democrats on whether they may be in contention there.
Yeah, well, look, they're looking at other states and they're looking at other special elections that have happened in Florida where Democrats have overperformed. And it is a +9 Republican district. It is also the district where Mar-a-Lago is. So that symbolically, for Democrats would be a really big get if they were able to flip that seat. It belonged to a Republican that DeSantis appointed to a local position. And so being able to come in and potentially win that seat would be something that the party would really want to see happen. It is represented, or excuse me, the Democrat in the race is Emily Gregory. She's a local business owner. She's never run for a political office before. She has a past working in public health in other states. And she just really felt motivated by, the high prices in Florida, like a lot of people who are running for office. And then John Maples is the Republican, and he has been endorsed by Trump. And he is a financial advisor. He seems to sort of be taken by surprise that Trump even endorsed in the race. I had the opportunity to speak with him last week. It really came for him out of nowhere. And so I don't know. Republicans seem pretty optimistic about it, and I feel like they usually tell me when they're not feeling so optimistic. And either way, I think it'll be tight, and I think we'll see a lot more money go into the race, even in the next few days.
How much might Democrats' strength this year, do you think, be determined by concern amongst Venezuelans and Cubans over the Trump administration's immigration crackdown? And do you think that U.S. intervention in Venezuela and possibly Cuba might make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes a difference. I think that there have been a lot of people who were very concerned, and you can see that by the way that Republicans are even acting regarding, canceling TPS for Venezuelans, regarding mass deportations, Alligator Alcatraz detention center. You really see even a lot of Republicans speak out about it who are down here in Miami. And so that has really caused a lot of backlash. It's caused people to worry about, what might happen to their families. And they just feel that they were misled in terms of understanding that Trump's immigration policy would be rooted more toward looking at, those who had also committed serious crimes versus anybody who was undocumented. And so the mayor of Miami, who was elected down here, the city of Miami, she thinks that immigration played a very big part in her getting elected to be, the first Democrat in 30 years to be elected. And but all that doesn't really occur in isolation, because on the one hand you have the deportation tactics, but on the other hand you have people celebrating in the streets about Maduro being arrested. And so that has been received very positively. Obviously, there's a lot of consternation about what might come next. And if things really go south, that could also have an impact. But the idea of Maduro being out of office, the idea that Cuba could be next for a lot of people, we've seen a lot of demonstrations after the strikes in Iran down here in Miami. There were people who were demonstrating to say that they wanted Cuba to be next. So it's just very interesting to see how these policies are being received, in South Florida or in other parts of Florida versus in the rest of the country. It's very distinct.
I mean, do you see those dynamics playing out in any sort of specific races? Do Democrats see any vulnerabilities for congressional Republicans in Florida? I'm thinking maybe Congresswoman Salazar.
Yeah, definitely. So they have really targeted her seat, and they've targeted it for a while. So it's a Miami area district, and she did win by 21 points last cycle. So that actually makes it higher than some of the other seats that they're trying to compete in. But because of the high number of people who, have immigrant ties, and also the high number of people who lost health insurance because Republicans did not vote to support an expansion of the Affordable Care Act subsidies that make health insurance more affordable for more people, that has been another thing that has really weighed on Salazar in particular. And in fact, she voted to extend those subsidies, and she's been very outspoken when it comes to immigration policy. So I think just the fact that she is recognizing these issues and talking about them and voting differently than a lot of her colleagues shows that she understands that it's important to the district.
Let's talk about redistricting. The governor's called a special session in late April to tackle redistricting. Could that be, do you think, a cause for concern from Democrats? Do they think it's a cause for concern, and particularly in places like Darren Soto's congressional district, Orange and Osceola counties, which has, a large Hispanic population, in which the GOP has been looking to target, to flip for some time?
So actually, this is more mixed, I would say, because we don't know what the maps are going to look like. You actually have some Republicans who are even concerned about what might happen. Look, they've already been advantaged to, the maps are already heavily advantaged to Republicans, right? And so once you start redrawing some of these boundaries, you risk then changing the calculus for other people. And so I don't know what the maps look like right now, but I wouldn't say that there's an automatic assumption that it's going to benefit Republicans when it's all said and done. So the governor has said that he wants to wait on the Supreme Court decision, which, we may not have by the end of April. And so I think once we kind of know what those maps look like, we'll get a better sense of that. The one that DeSantis has explicitly called out is District 20 with Sheila Shervillis McCormick. And that has a very active primary right now. And it's heavily Democratic, but that's the main one where the governor has said that he thinks that one is ripe for redrawing.
Well, talking about Republicans then, do you get a sense of how GOP leaders in Florida are honing their strategy and messaging in Florida this midterm, with Democrats feeling somewhat energized? Do the Republicans have a strategy to try to push back?
I mean, the strategy that those in Congress are going for is really to try to point out that they extended the tax cuts. It's a difficult message because what they're essentially saying is, look, we know everything's expensive, but they would have been a lot worse had we not extended the Trump tax cuts. Now, it's true, people would have been paying higher taxes pretty much across the board. However, it's much more potent often in politics to talk about things that people have lost versus what they could have lost or what they gained even. And so for Democrats to go around saying, hey, you can't afford housing, you can't afford property insurance, you can't afford groceries, you lost your health care, that can be, very, very salient. And so I think it will be very salient across the state. However, going back to kind of the initial topic with this conversation, you have so many more Republicans in the state of Florida, 1.5 million now. There are going to be even more by November. And so that makes it so difficult when so many people just vote, party line. And so the question is, how much can Democrats bring along a lot of those no party affiliated voters who have leaned right in past elections? And the question is, can they get more left leaning out to vote in a way that would really make a difference for them in some key races?
Well, you may have already answered this next question then. That's on the gubernatorial race. And, there are currently, I think, more than 40 candidates vying to succeed Governor DeSantis. How do you see that battle shaping up? I mean, do Democrats really have much of a chance? The governor certainly seemed to have a stranglehold on that office, while he was there. Seems like a tall order, doesn't it, for Democrats?
Well, so here's the thing. Byron Donalds, who is a congressman and is the Trump endorsed candidate, is so far ahead of anyone else in the race. And, as of the end of the year, he had already raised $45 million. And just to make it clear, that's a lot of money to raise for a governor's race, especially in a state, that's considered more safe. And then, so even for anyone on the Republican side to try to beat him is going to be really, really hard. Polling shows that he's way ahead. He also has a top-notch team around him, some of the same people that helped orchestrate Trump's return to the White House. So that really makes it, again, people who are really experienced, who aren't afraid to, be really, really tough, who know a lot of national players and all these other things. So that's where it's difficult for any Republicans. The Democrats on their side, if you look at polling, it does look like they might be able to get, fairly close to Donald's. Maybe, single digits even is where they could end up. However, being able to compete toe to toe is you'd almost have to have a lot more go incredibly wrong for Republicans and wrong for Trump. And so it just trying to make up that difference is very, very difficult. Not saying it can't be done. I don't, it's so early at this point. But, on the one hand, you have David Jolly, who is a former Republican congressman, and maybe that helps to bring in more, NPAs, even disaffected Republicans. And then you have Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings, who has a really long background in law enforcement. And so branding these two as kind of far left, as what Republicans have tried to do with Democrats in the past, is going to be a lot harder. That is still how they're going to message them, right? And how they are messaging them. But it does create a little bit more of a challenge in terms of, trying to kind of make them the boogeyman.
Well, does Governor DeSantis have any say in that? Are endorsements going to be important? We just saw the Volusia County Sheriff endorse the Lieutenant Governor, for example. Or does Trump's endorsement pretty much still trump all, do you think?
I can tell you that talking to grassroots around Florida, they're very concerned about why the governor won't endorse Byron Donalds. And they really want to hear from him. Now, grassroots Republicans are, people who volunteer for the party. They're very devoted. They're not like your average GOP voter. But I do think that it would make a difference. Not necessarily surpassing Trump, but I do think that people would, if he were to endorse Paul Renner, who's the former House Speaker, or Jay Collins, who is his lieutenant governor, I do think that would cause people to look twice. It might change what donors decide to do as well. If Casey DeSantis gets into the race, that even makes kind of an interesting ballot box question, because you have a lot of people who will go to vote who won't necessarily make the connection that it's not Ron DeSantis on their ballot. They might just see DeSantis and then cast their ballot that way. And I don't know what she's going to do. She has a while to decide still. And so Trump's endorsement has been shown to be very, very powerful, but I do think that there would be a lot of curiosity and eyeballs around DeSantis if he were to do something. I just don't know that he will, because he has his own political future to think about, right? We don't know what he's doing next. He's term limited out. And so for him to cross President Trump, when by all accounts they have a really good relationship right now, just seems like not the best move for his own future.
You mentioned sort of dissatisfaction amongst the Republican base, but a lot of kind of MAGA conservatives, those on the right of the party, seem to be dissatisfied with Byron Donalds. He's been taking a lot of incoming in recent times from that wing of the party. I suppose that must give some comfort to those that are taking him on, that maybe there is some wiggle room there to get a bit of momentum going.
Yeah, look, I think that there's also a sense too that, maybe Donalds ends up doing something that makes it difficult for Republicans to vote for him. Anything can happen, right? Or there's opposition research that comes out, things like that. But he's someone who has been by the president's side consistently, and really through the 2024 election, he went all over the country to help Trump. And so I would think that if Trump saw that Donalds was having difficulty, that he would probably, make that extra push, even though obviously he has a lot to think about with the midterms. They kind of want Florida to just be safe ground and left on its own. But yeah, there is an argument out there that has been fanned by the governor that that Representative Donalds is insufficiently conservative. And so that has really caused a lot of the chatter that you're seeing on social media and among Florida's grassroots.